and the Supremes and Stop in the Name of Love. Hello, how are you? It's Michelle Adamson here on BBC Radio Manchester. Hope you're well. Great to have your company. Now, over the next couple of hours, we've got lots of music interspersed with some of the wonderful stuff we've heard here on BBC Radio Manchester this week. Coming up in the next hour, we've got the much anticipated autobiography of the Manchester music legend Morrissey. That was released this week, and we got our entertainment reporter Colin Patterson to cast his eye over it and give us his verdict. And we'll be talking about the charms of China and how Greater Manchester is making the most, shall we say, of its relationship with what people are saying is the new economic superpower that's emerging in the Far East, and how your amazing fundraising efforts mean that cancer patients are now spared those long journeys that they sometimes have to make for hospital treatment. But first, now we're living in tough economic times at the moment, aren't we? Many people finding it's difficult to make ends meet and having to tighten the belts a bit. But have you ever wondered how the financial climate at the moment is affecting important people like the Tooth Fairy? Yes, I did say the Tooth Fairy. Now, she's got to dispense a lot of money, hasn't she? Has she been hit by the recession, though? Well, you know that magical donation that she makes when you lose a tooth? What did you used to get as a child? I think I got 20p per tooth from the Tooth Fairy when I was a child. But what's it now? I mean, has it kept up with inflation? I'm not quite sure what the going rate is at the moment. Well, our presenter, Sam Walker, revealed that her 6-year-old daughter had lost her very first tooth, and she found herself wondering just how much the Tooth Fairy was going to bring. So we asked our reporter, Kevin Fitzpatrick, who was out and about in Rusholme, to do a bit of investigating for us.
The Tooth Fairy has her origins back in early Europe, when tradition was to bury baby teeth in the garden of the house where you lived. So part of it was to mark like a rite of passage, because obviously they're moving from being your little baby into the start of their childhood proper. But it was also part of superstition, because they were a bit worried, should a witch get hold of these baby teeth, then they could perhaps get hold of them and put a bad luck spell onto the child. Okay. So they used to bury all the teeth in the garden to make sure that didn't happen. But as time moved on, people started to worry a bit less about witches' influence in their lives, and by the early 1900s, somehow the Tooth Fairy got the message out there that she was sick of all this digging, and people could just leave them under a child's pillow and that would be enough. So these days, as you know, if a child does lose a tooth, put it on their pillow and then goes to sleep straight away without getting out of bed or messing about, there'll be a reward under that pillow by the morning.
So how much is what's she in the market for these days? What's a child's tooth fetching for the Tooth Fairy?
Well, according to a survey in America last year, they reckon it's $3.70, which transcribes as £2.33 over here, which seems quite a lot to me, because there's lots of teeth. So 20 baby teeth on average, all going to be falling out between the age of 5, 6 and 7. So that's lots of teeth. When you've got 3 children, that's, 3 times the amount. So I suppose in any house you have to be conscious that the Tooth Fairy might not have all this money to keep throwing at these children for this teeth. I think when I was growing up, it was 20 pence. And when the first one arrives, it's so exciting, isn't it? I know you're a bit upset, but it is a little moment, isn't it? So we were really pleased when the Tooth Fairy gave our daughter £1, but then more teeth start coming in quick succession, don't they? And you have to think, well, does the Tooth Fairy always have the right amount of change? If a tooth falls out just before bedtime. So that's the challenge you're facing. But I've been speaking to a few people around here in Rusholme, asking them, what they used to get and what their children have received as well.
£1 is all right, because they're all very young and get the first teeth, and and we get a lot of them. So it's just £1, I think.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, yes, quite good. They get found they cut one every week, don't they?
When I was a kid, about 50 pence. Yeah.
Per tooth, because that racks up?
Yeah, roughly about per tooth, yeah.
So what do you reckon in the modern day, what would be appropriate?
Anything from £1 to £5, depending on the ages.
But if you're giving them a £5, they're quite young, they'll be 4, 5 and 6 when they come in. It can rack up, can't it?
But like I said to you before, the value of the money, and now children realise the value of money these days. When you give a child of, say, 3 or 4 £1, they look at £1 and they know what they can get with £1, believe it or not. So they understand the value of money. So £1 is quite insignificant to a kid these days. That's why, if you want to keep them happy, you give them a £5.
So what does your little boy get?
He gets £1.50 to £2, depending.
Because there's big teeth and small teeth as well, I suppose, is there?
Yeah, there is, yeah.
And does it get to the point where he's quite excited when his tooth's going to fall out because he knows?
Yeah, because he knows he can't wait. He's like, oh, the tooth fairy's going to come, I'm going to get money.
A fiver? A fiver? I tell you what, Kev, the tooth fairy, actually, when this tooth did fall out yesterday, it was quite near to bedtime. I did wonder how the tooth fairy would cope with the change issue, and it seemed the tooth fairy did only have £1, otherwise it might have been a bit less. But the tooth fairy also wrote a little letter to my daughter and said, oh, how exciting, it's your first tooth. There was a picture of a fairy on this letter, and my husband texted me, actually, because I obviously leave for work before the kids get up, but he said she was so happy she came down and got me before she even looked in the envelope. She wants to write a thank you letter to the tooth fairy.
Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? I think, though, a little bit, really, sometimes the parents should be getting a little reward as well, because that half hour before the tooth finally comes out can be a bit of an ordeal if you've got a fairly dramatic child on your hands.
Kevin Fitzpatrick reporting there on the very important issue of just how the tooth fairy is coping in the current financial crisis. Now, Manchester's Chinatown is perhaps one of the most vibrant Chinese areas in the country. We've got the wonderful Chinese Arch there, haven't we? And oodles of restaurants and Chinese supermarkets. There's the Chinese Arts Centre there as well in Chinatown in Manchester. And Chinese New Year is always quite a spectacular occasion in Chinatown with the Chinese dragon and the parade. But China's links with Greater Manchester have been very much in the news this week. More about that in a minute. But first, here's Spandau Ballet. Spandau Ballet and True. I'm Michelle Adamson. Hope you're well. Now, all this past week on BBC Radio Manchester, we have been looking at our links with China because Chancellor George Osborne said that we, as a country, we need to be building a firmer relationship financial-wise with China. He then announced, when he was in Beijing, the biggest inward investment project in the UK so far by the Chinese, and that's a new hub city at Manchester Airport. Now, Beijing Construction Engineering Group, they're going to be providing the hotels, the offices and the businesses on that site at Manchester Airport. But just how much do you know about China and about its historic links with Greater Manchester? Well, as I said, Chinatown is one of the most vibrant areas, Chinese areas of the UK. It's the second biggest, I think, in the country after London. And BBC Radio Manchester's Jacqueline Payne has been finding out more about the history of the area and its community with Bonnie Young from the Yang Sing restaurant.
We're just approaching the Chinatown Manchester Arch. This is the start of what you would call Chinatown, is it?
Yes. Chinatown, sort of, in the main, it's sort of 4 or 5 streets that cut through. The Imperial Arch sits right smack bang in the middle, along with the pagoda. All the streets are lined with Chinese, Asian businesses, eateries, cafes. It's a really colourful area with lots of different characters, colours and cultures, really.
And so how many restaurants would you imagine are in this Chinatown area?
I think you've got between 30 and 40 restaurants just in this area immediately. Some of them are Chinese. We have sort of Northern Chinese, Southern Chinese, Thai, Nepalese, Malay, Singaporean. There's a real sort of mix.
Getting lots of wafts as we wander through. It's lunchtime, isn't it? There's lots of aromas.
Rumbling.
What part of this area did Chinatown really first spring up? Is there a particular shop that opened? Is there a particular area that started becoming known as Chinatown?
Well, the original sort of records, the first records of a Chinese restaurant in the area was on Mosley Street. That was a restaurant that opened in the 1940s called Ping On. Within this area that we now know as Chinatown was originally cotton mill warehousing. And a lot of the landlords were originally sort of Jewish merchants, cotton merchants. And then the Chinese businesses and Chinese immigrants that initially came over, I think they must have had special relationships or sort of certainly had some cultural connections. And then increasingly more Chinese people moved into the area, and it wasn't sort of a defined civic space as Chinatown. And it's just sort of organically sprung up.
lots and lots of restaurants in this area, but we've got some supermarkets as well.
Probably one of my favourites is the Wing Fat supermarket, which is just here after the arch. It replicates the sort of warren of streets that run through Chinatown. If we pop in, we've got some of like live crabs, lobster.
Is that some octopus over there?
Yes, squid.
Squid,
yeah, that's right.
And these are things that are really important in Chinese cooking?
Absolutely. These are things that, you would grace the table at home on a regular basis.
The thing about there being so many restaurants, it was something that people could do when they came over here. It was a skill and a trade that they had. They could immediately start making a living for themselves and their family.
There is that element, but a lot of people who came over, that was their trade. And in Chinese culture, a lot of it is focused on the food and drink element. All our festivals and celebrations are marked with different foods. Because China is such a vast territory, so the food is so diverse, and I think that's really reflected in Chinatown here. So we're approaching, this is George Street in Chinatown now. I think the casino that we've got in Chinatown is so much more like a social club. We've got a huge retirement home that's spread out across the city, and in the main it's a lot of elderly Chinese people, and they all live in the city. And then this is their sort of stomping ground where they come in for tea, mahjong, cards, chess, to read the paper and meet up with friends.
And so we're making our way back up now to the Chinatown Arch where we began.
The arch that we've got is not necessarily the biggest, but it's certainly one of the most beautiful and ornate. Red's a very lucky colour, golds. There's dragons painted all over it. The dragon is symbolic of all things good, really. Strength, growth, power. And it's a really important symbol.
That's Jacqueline Payne there talking to Bonnie Young from the Yang Sing restaurant in Manchester's Chinatown. Now, he's famous for chucking about the odd bunch of gladioli while spouting lyrics like punctured bicycle on a hillside desolate. But Manchester singer Morrissey released his autobiography this week, and we'll find out next what juicy tidbits are in it. Here's Boyzone. For many, epitomises Manchester of the 80s. Now, he's quite a colourful, eccentric sort of character, and his long-awaited autobiography went on sale this week. It's been published as a Penguin Classic, which means that it joins the likes of Homer, Virgil and Henry James. Now, there was much speculation about whether it was going to be a kiss and tell type of book and whether he'd be using it to settle old scores, and indeed if there would be any juicy tidbits in there, bits of scandal and gossip. Well, our entertainment reporter Colin Patterson got hold of one of the first copies, and he spoke to Alan Beswick at breakfast about some of Morrissey's revelations.
He says, very honestly in the book, the first time he was ever in a serious relationship was with a man, and it was 1995. He says that was the first time in his life when I became we. And he says how the hours no longer mattered, the days flew by. But in true Morrissey fashion, Alan Bennett is the man who points out they're going to break up when he goes round to visit them and says, something's gone wrong with you two. You haven't said a word to each other since I arrived.
Oh, fantastic.
So Alan Bennett breaks up Morrissey's first proper relationship.
But for a horrible moment then, I thought he was going to say he was having the relationship with Alan Bennett. Now, that would have been a story.
That would have been a story. But when you go for an autobiography, what you want is tidbits, you want gossip, you want him being indiscreet, and you absolutely get all that. He loves name dropping. He can't help himself from saying, I was in LA and I met Whoopi Goldberg for breakfast. Bill Cosby was on the Johnny Carson show and realised if he said my name, he got a cheer. So he said my name 30 times. He tells the story of how Mick Jagger came to see the Smiths but left after 4 songs. But he understood why. The name dropping is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, it's good. It's a bestseller. It's got to be.
The writing is also beautiful at some times as well. He describes one of his teachers, of course he went to school in Manchester. He describes one of his teachers. Miss Redmond is ageing and will never marry and will die smelling of attics.
Oh,
that's a fantastic description. Do you want to hear his description of Manchester?
Oh, please.
Manchester is the old fire wheezing its last, where we all worry ourselves soulless, forbidden to be romantic. That's his view of Manchester in the 1970s.
Wow.
And he is a wonderful travel writer. He writes about travelling from Piccadilly Station down to Euston and what that meant to him. And he describes these journeys with great beauty. And then there are truly hilarious stories throughout it as well. I just kept laughing. He says he really doesn't like Sandy Shaw. That's one of the revelations to come out of it. She comes round to his house, knocks on his door. He refuses to answer it. He ducks down thinking she won't know I'm in. The next thing he sees, he's a couple of stories up. She's going by on the window ledge of his kitchen.
But didn't he do a song with Sandy Shaw?
She covered a Hand in Glove.
Yeah.
And he goes into the negotiations about that and says she was asking for 40%. There's a lot of bitterness in this book as well.
Really?
The famous court case of 1996 where the judge at the time, let me get the quote up so I get this right, the judge John Weeks, this was over the royalties to the Smith songs. Mike Joyce was entitled to 25%. The judge at the time described Morrissey as devious, truculent and unreliable. Morrissey spends 50 pages explaining why he's not. He goes on and on throughout the book about how the Smiths were only ever Morrissey and Marr, and he describes Judge John Weeks as the pride of the pipsqueakery.
The pride of pipsqueakery. Fabulous. You've got to admire his cheek, though, haven't you? Publishing it as a Penguin classic so that it'll sit alongside the likes of Homer and Virgil. Well, from one Manchester band legend to another, this is Gary Barlow's new tune. That's Gary Barlow and Let Me Go. Gary Barlow, of course, is a judge again on the X Factor this year. I don't know if you've been watching it at all, but we're on to the live finals now. So we're down to the last 10 or so of the contestants. But whatever happens to those finalists once they've been knocked out? I mean, can you actually remember many of the 10 finalists from last year? I think I'd struggle to actually name more than 2 or 3 of them. Well, the man who finished third last year, Chris Maloney from Liverpool, he's about to release his first debut single in a couple of weeks' time. And he spoke to Becky Want about his experience on the X Factor and some of the pressures that he faced.
It was quite a difficult time, the whole process. It was because I mean every week I was winning the public vote for the first 7 live shows. I actually triple the votes and won the first 7 live shows, and I think certain people thought, oh, he's going to win this, and they tried the utmost and tried the best to try and not let me win, and it was just...
But for some reason, you were fodder for the red tops for the newspaper. You were there, weren't you? Kind of every Monday there was a story about you. Constant rumours of backstage tensions and you falling out with people and using rude words to describe them. And then it became a bit more serious when there was cyberbullying going on, wasn't there? People were saying awful things about you.
I mean, what it was is the X Factor. It's for TV, and they say these things, or things happen, or they put into the papers, oh, Chris is a diva backstage, and it's totally untrue. But then you have to deal with that and have to, try and explain, I'm not this diva, I haven't used any rude words, and people tend to believe things that they read in the paper, which is unfortunate, and that resulted in obviously the cyberbullying. But I'm far from that person that they portrayed in the paper. It's just it makes me laugh now.
Obviously X Factor is on again now, and you're writing a column about it, so you're watching it very closely. But when you look back honestly on X Factor now, obviously you're watching it and it takes you back to last year. Was it a happy time for you, or do you think, oof, I'm really glad I'm not in the midst of that anymore?
I mean, I watched it for 8 years, and it took me 5 years to audition, and I was on the series for the 9th series, the 9th year, and at the beginning it was absolutely amazing. It's a great platform for anybody that wants to sing, and that's all I ever wanted to do. But then it got overshadowed by lies and by rumours.
But do you look back and think, oof, that was an awful I didn't enjoy it, that was a nightmare? The closer I got to the kind of final, the more of a nightmare it was for me.
I become very unwell towards the very end, which was a really bad time for me. But I don't regret auditioning, I don't regret doing it. I just think there could have been a little bit more safeguards in place for me, because, you know, I'm quite vulnerable and I've never been in that situation before. I've never, you know, I've never been on a TV show, a reality TV, a singing competition like that before. And, you know, there are people that are there to help you, and I just think that I could have got a little bit more help.
Christopher Maloney there, who came third in last year's X Factor, talking to Becky Want, who does get some fabulous celebrity guests on her programme, which is from midday and 3 o'clock in the afternoon every weekday. And in a bit, we're going to be hearing another fab interview she did with one of our national treasures, the playwright Alan Bennett. This is ABBA and Dancing Queen. ABBA and Dancing Queen. Now, as you probably know, as part of our £1 million appeal for the Christie, your amazing fundraising efforts meant that we've already gone past the halfway mark on the appeal, which meant that we could actually buy that mobile chemotherapy unit that we'd hoping to get hold of. And that unit was immediately then sent out on the roads of Greater Manchester, which meant that patients being treated for cancer could actually be treated nearer to home and didn't have to make sometimes long journeys to hospital to get the treatment they needed. Well, our reporter Richard Stead was there to see the unit in action for the very first time.
Well, today is a very special day. I'm at the Tesco Extra on Silk Street in Rochdale, and here in front of me in the car park is the Christie's mobile chemotherapy unit, supported by BBC Radio Manchester. Let's go inside. OK, well, here we are inside the mobile chemotherapy unit, and the first thing that strikes you is just how big it is. It feels like you're actually at a ward in a hospital and not, effectively, on the back of a lorry. There's even a gents and a ladies in a disabled toilet, a consulting room, and 1, 2, 3, 4 huge, great, comfortable-looking chairs where patients sit in to get their chemotherapy treatment. And of course, here in Rochdale is a long way from the Christie in Withington, so this is treatment right on the people's doorstep. So let's speak to Marcel Lewis, a chemo sister here at the mobile chemotherapy unit. Marcel, so talk through what goes on in this treatment room.
Okay, well, this is the area where patients will have their chemotherapy. As you said, there are 4 luxurious treatment chairs that the patients will be treated in. They will be hooked up to a drip, which is an IV infusion, and the chemotherapy is administered intravenously over the space of maybe a half hour or an hour, or maybe up to 3 hours.
And people will come back here right on their doorstep for treatment, rather than going all the way to Withington in South Manchester.
Definitely, that's the whole point. We're bringing the chemotherapy to the patient's doorsteps. In effect, we're bringing the Christie to the doorsteps, because some patients might previously have had to travel 2, maybe 3 hours of round trip, but here it's on their doorstep, and that's got to be better for them.
Every week, around 600 people receive outpatient treatment for chemotherapy at the Christie. It's hoped the mobile unit will treat around 75 of those close to where they live. Margaret, not her real name, lives in Milnrow. Previously, she's travelled to Withington, but today she's received breast cancer treatment down the road in Rochdale.
I was diagnosed with breast cancer about February last year. And but it's breast cancer that spread to the bones. And I've been going to Christie's every 3 weeks, and sometimes more often, since February. And it's a long journey to Christie's, especially early in the morning in the winter. Well, sometimes we have to be there for 8 o'clock. And then you see a doctor, and then have to wait quite a long time for the treatment. But here, well, the treatment will last half an hour, and to come here and just have half an hour's treatment and go home, it saves such a lot of time and a lot less stress.
The mobile chemotherapy unit will be operating 5 days a week throughout the year, and it's thanks to help from your donations.
absolutely fabulous news there that the mobile chemotherapy unit that you helped to buy with your amazing fundraising efforts is now out and about in Greater Manchester, helping make life just that little bit easier for people. I'm Michelle Adamson, giving you the chance to have a listen to some of the best bits you may have missed here on BBC Radio Manchester during the past week. Coming up next, we've got some amazing memories from an anti-apartheid campaigner who spent time in jail alongside Nelson Mandela. But first, this is James Taylor.
When you're down and troubled and you need a help.
Now, South Africa's most famous trial, the Rivonia hearing at Pretoria's Supreme Court, began 50 years ago this week. And among the people who were sentenced was the legendary anti-apartheid campaigner and freedom fighter Dennis Goldberg. Now, he was among the youngest of those sentenced alongside Nelson Mandela to life imprisonment back in 1964. He then went on to spend 22 years in jail in Pretoria. Well, speaking on BBC Radio Manchester earlier this week, he told Alan Beswick at breakfast about the moment when he was given his sentence.
He sentenced us to life imprisonment. And life imprisonment was a relief. We expected to be sentenced to death, and the media were calling for it, and the prosecution. And when he said that he could show some leniency, but only to life imprisonment 4 times over, that was life's wonderful. That was my response.
Really?
Aloud, yes. My mother called out, "What is it? What is it?" You know, mothers get anxious even when you're 31.
They do, yes. I think it's their job.
What is it? What is it? She said. And I said, life, and life's wonderful. And truly it is. We've defeated the apartheid.
Have you?
Well, we have a constitution that has only one mention of race or racism, and that's to make it a criminal offence. There's no race in any of our laws, but how do you change people's thinking after hundreds of years of indoctrination, both sides, white and black and in between colours? These remain. People need to consciously say, I won't be racist.
But I mean, that's about what's going on in the head, and if people believe in it in the soul. South Africa's still a divided country. It's still, there are a few black people that have made it into the millionaire fold, but it's still financially divided.
Well, yes, it's true. And it's going to take generations. I've always known that. And if I were to say to you, in Britain, do we have an egalitarian society? Do big business really care about poor people? We still have the apartheid labour relations of masses of low-paid workers who happen to be black. And, of course, there's great resentment. And we had miners go on strike, killed other miners, breakaway union, conflicts in the union movement. Police went in to find the killers and killed another 34 people. What a tragedy. And it's over a sense of economists and companies saying we can't change it because everything will go under. It's not true.
Is this South Africa of today? Is this the South Africa you had in your mind 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when you got involved in all of that?
Oh, no, I was looking for a really much better, ideal country of people who are racially tolerant and helpful and human beings who care about each other. But in my heart, I knew that this is going to take generations. How long it takes to overcome prejudice.
The anti-apartheid campaigner Dennis Goldberg there talking to Alan Beswick at breakfast 50 years on from that trial which saw him end up in a jail alongside Nelson Mandela. Now, coming up next, the rather humbling tale of a group of people who wanted to say thank you to a Moss Side food bank, which helped them in their time of need. But first, this is Tavares. Tavares and Don't Take Away the Music here on BBC Radio Manchester. I'm Michelle Adamson, looking back at a few of the best bits that we've heard here on BBC Radio Manchester throughout the week. Now, it's a rather sad and disturbing fact that food banks have been springing up at a rather alarming rate as people struggle to make ends meet and even actually to afford to feed themselves. Now, the country's main food bank provider, the Trussell Trust, has said that it's seen a threefold increase in the number of people needing their help. Well, this week, people who've been helped by a food bank in Manchester's Moss Side area took part in a fun run to raise funds for it because it supported them and their friends when they were hungry and destitute. The group donned some fancy dress and huffing and puffing along at the back with them was our reporter Alexia O'Connor, who'd gone along to meet them.
Outside Moss Side Fire Station, a motley crew of runners is limbering up in the cold autumn sunshine. Some are staff and some are clients of the Hope Project, which is run by the NHS for people with mental health problems. They're here to raise money for their local food bank, which has helped many of them out in their time of need. Lots of them, including service users Amy, Ashley and David, are in fancy dress.
I suppose it's my way of saying thank you. If I wouldn't have had it, I don't know what would have done.
You'd have gone hungry, wouldn't you?
I would have gone hungry, yes.
Yeah. Well, you look... Do you know what? I'm going to let you describe it. Tell me what you're wearing.
Pink and green socks, tutu, black and white t-shirt and pink and green leggings.
It does mean a lot to us who are there today. We've got more people coming and see how it goes, isn't it?
I can't run, so I'm walking in the race.
Just tell us briefly why you've been hurt, haven't you?
Yeah, I got ran over yesterday.
So you've just shown me your bruises. You're covered in bruises. You're obviously in pain. I can't believe that you're doing this. This is amazing. So why?
Like when people sponsor someone, they should step up. It's for charity at the end of the day, innit?
My name's Samantha Bradshaw. I'm one of the health trainers for NHS. The people who I was seeing round here was unable to buy food for themselves, and I noticed a lot of the people had families, and I was giving my dinners away. Everybody else was giving theirs away just so they could have something to eat.
You're giving your dinners to your clients because they've got nothing?
Yeah, we was. So we found a leaflet and I rang Michelle, and she kindly came out of hours to give somebody a parcel. From then, we regularly see you, yeah? And I thought, what can we do to give something back to the food bank?
I'm Michelle Welch. I'm one of the coordinators of Compassion Food Bank. We saw a lot more people coming after April with the change in the welfare benefits system. On Friday, we had a lady came. She was sent to us by a job centre in Didsbury, and she admitted she walked, and it was the other side of Didsbury, it's not the side that's close to us. She'd walked with a teenage son, and I think she was willing to walk back with the heavy bags of food. We're just seeing people coming from all over the city. We had an elderly mother with a daughter come along, and they walked from Wythenshawe. So it is getting tough for all sorts of people.
OK, everybody, are you all ready for this run? Just over a mile it is. Get yourselves ready. Let's go!
And so the group sets off, bright neon tutus and stripy tights bobbing through the streets of Moss Side, and all of them are being led and motivated onwards by their fitness coach Michelle Riddles.
Come on, just under half a mile to go. Come on, Miss Amy. That's it, come on. I did it. Oh, dear me. How do you feel? I feel good. Oh, you're the one with the cracked ribs.
I was trying to run up there and I couldn't run, so...
But you did it.
That's it. At the end of the day, that's what it's for. Charity, and proper glad I did it.
I can't breathe. But it was amazing. Really proud. Really, really proud that we all finally achieved something for a brilliant cause.
Quite astonishing that man that had been involved in that fun run had actually had an accident the day before, and he was covered in bruises, got a cracked rib, but he still wanted to take part in the event because he wanted to give something back to the food bank project. Amazing. And they actually managed to raise about £500 with that fun run. Here's Snow Patrol.
We'll do